of at least relatively popular Wolfram function repository functions that deal with associations, which we had Constantine look over, and we wanted to just kind of run by some of these ideas and take a look and see which of these were worth investigating more. Constantine didn't think any of them were immediately worth dismissing, and that second category ties into a larger LCC discussion, but we wanted to include those as well.
Okay, so this is how you, when you do Keymap, what happens when two keys are made to collide? Is that correct? And how do you, and what happens right now? If I do Keymap.
I think it takes the second one, because it's the same thing as like if you called map on the normal form and then called association on it.
Okay, that's a little funky.
I mean, I think we've talked about this in either LCC or this meeting before, and I still think that it would be good to have some sort of like merging function option or something like that.
That's what I thought we'd agreed. Yes.
Or alternatively, we can have Keymap indexed to append 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Well, that's an interesting idea as well. I mean, the fact that we have to have both map and map indexed is unfortunate. It would be much better if somehow we could have a headdress for the function where we could say, map, indexed function or something of blah, blah, blah. I don't quite know how that would work because, I mean, we're feeding, right now.
I think it can't be around the function. There would have to be some, yeah, because right now there's also association map and parallel map. Both of those I've wanted map indexed with them before and I couldn't get it.
Right, well, how could we do that?
There's a similar,
we could do it by a headdress because it could detect the headdress.
You mean a headdress around map or around the function?
I'm thinking around the function because map could detect that. Maybe that's it.
I think that's weird though. Because it means that it looks like the function has some kind of magical state. I think if you're talking about headdresses, although I think this also would look really weird, it would be something like a headdress indexed around map. So you'd say indexed of map of blah, blah, blah. This is similar to some of the things that I think have come up before, but which I don't think have ever been tried, which is like having a parallel headdress.
Yes.
But, yeah.
What about
because there's also
sorry, I was suggesting what about an option to various functions?
Yeah,
like an indexed arrow true.
It's just rather ugly to have that change. It's like the handler, like these things which are handler functions and so on, that say, they say what to provide. How does that mechanism work? Handler functions keys.
So I just, as another question, I think this is a very similar issue, I think, to the issue of like the parallel versions of these functions too, because it's basically that you have these functions like any function with map in its name, there kind of should be a parallel and an indexed variant. So, and also there could be parallel and indexed, simultaneously parallel and indexed variants. So it's sort of worth thinking about. For example, if we had the headdress thing of like indexed of map, then if it's parallel, then you have this crazy parallel of indexed of map.
Right, but don't we already have parallelize?
Well, parallelize is weird because it's sort of like, for example, if you have an expression with many nested maps and you call parallelize on it, I don't think there's a way of knowing which map it's going to parallelize. It has some policy, but I don't think you can really control it. It's sort of this automatic magic thing.
Can I ask a question about select? Could select, is there in fact a meaningful select indexed? I think there is. It's like both take the value and take the index position.
And the index position would be the position in the original list or the index within?
No, the original list. The original list.
Okay.
Well, as opposed to, it could be that, you know, after you've deleted the first 5 elements in the original list in the process of selecting,
I
now
know,
you're going
but
to,
I think that's much funkier. I think that this is
Yeah, okay.
mostly, you know, you select everything greater than 100, unless it was, you know, in the first n arguments, in the first n elements, you know, like for example, I could want to, if the thing is bigger than the square of its position.
Okay. Although to be fair, that is also the much easier to implement case. I mean, right now you can always just take your list, transpose it with range of length of list, and then run select. But the other case where, you know, where you're sort of keeping track of the number as it goes is a lot harder to write. But I admit it's also probably much more obscure.
But I mean, okay, so look, the concept, I have this feeling in this nascent multi-computation business where we're also looking at well, okay, so there's more metadata about execution history. So for example, in /dot, I would really like to be able to capture the information about where did the rule get applied. So for example, here's an example. Let's say I say, you know, ABC /dot, you know, underscore symbol goes to, you know, X underscore symbol goes to f of X or something. Okay. My question is, oh, wonderful. Okay, when this F gets applied, I would like to know, right now, the only thing I know, there's no indexed version of this. I can't have this F here know where it was getting applied. Does that make sense?
There's replace part.
I know, but that's different. That's different. That's, you know, where you want it applied. Let me give you an example.
Well, this is map indexed with the level spec from 0 to infinity, head 0 true, or something like that.
Of replace.
Of replace, yeah.
Yeah, map index.
Although actually, sorry, I'm not sure if map, I think.
No, it has to be map indexed. It would have to be map indexed.
But yeah, I mean, there's a detail about replace with a level spec is different from replace all, because it depends on whether it goes from the top or the bottom. I think if you use map, it's equivalent to replace with a level spec. So it's technically a little bit different from replace all, but it's pretty close.
Yeah.
Okay. But then this would be, okay, so, but the point is, the metadata on where this got done, which is essentially what we're talking about in an indexed map. It's kind of a location-based you know, it's right, and Ethan is commenting here about index, element, pattern, and functions. Well, right. I mean, so what are the things we might want? We might want to know, you know, when we're mapping through an expression or something, you know, what expr are we what sub-expression are we looking at? Where is it in the whole expression? We could also ask which serial number of sub-expression are we looking at? It could be
really an interesting thing in except in the level 1 case. Is that actually an interesting thing?
Well, it might be if for the next case, you know, a test for whether to consider the sub-expression. Then it might be interesting.
Whether to apply the replacement, like
or whether to do the action. Yes, I mean, like a map with, you know, I'm going to map F, but I don't want the F to be applied if the thing it's going to be applied to is a number. Let's say.
I mean, that's kind of like replace, but yeah.
Yes,
or like if, to be fair, I mean, if number q of hash, then hash, otherwise f hash or something. But yeah.
Yes, it is. It is that. It is that. And maybe that's the. But if there was a general mechanism for saying, and maybe this doesn't make any sense, but now, I mean, if we look at, for example, nearest, it's also got this thing about, so nearest has, what is going on with this documentation? What is going on there? Why is it spinning like that? I hope this is getting reported. Avery, this is for you again. I've been saying this is happening, and John has been saying he can't reproduce when it's happening. So if you take the timestamp
Yep.
of this
Yeah,
session,
I'll pass it along. I saw that too. Thank you.
I've had the same issue, by the way, with documentation search hanging for a minute, but yeah.
Do you think it happens late in a session? Because I've been running this session for a long time. You know, I'm sure if I say, oh, actually not the kernel session, but if I've been running, I don't even know how do you find out how long you've been running the front end session for?
You're at untitled 40, which is a hint.
That is indeed a hint. Right, that is indeed a hint. I think I've been running this for a hugely long time, and I think that's what causes this to be slow. Okay, so in nearest, the return is the element, the index, or the distance. Yeah, okay, that's a little different from this. But I mean, okay, so the concept
Right,
here,
because we need to distinguish between inputs and outputs. Right, there are
Well,
some
yeah.
cases where we want to know, right, there's like the position of, in like, we want max position. And there's the case where, well, we want to know the position to know whether or not to do anything, or how we, you know, what we do based on that.
right, but I mean, the thing that we might do, okay, here's a crazy idea, okay? This is a bad name, but let's imagine we had a function called Metamap, okay? And what Metamap does is, instead of that, everything that it brings in, it is effectively feeding you an association that says position, blah, 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 expression, blah, blah, blah. And so then what this would look like is, if you use Metamap, you'd be saying, you know, if hash position is greater than whatever, you know, blah, 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 then do this to the expression and so on. So in other words, it's a more annotated form of map. If you say, oh, it might be inefficient, well, A, you probably study this expression to figure out what things it contains, and B, if you wanted to, you could have a handler function keys analog that would be you know, that would tell it which things to bother to put in this association. I don't think this is totally crazy.
I mean, I just think it's very annoying to write hash value or hash expression. I mean, it's way more verbose.
It is, but it would be nice, clear code. I mean, having #2 and things isn't beautiful, you know, isn't the clearest thing in the code. I mean, I think I mean, the point about this would be, it would be a,
I mean, it's not, this may be inefficient. This is going to be hugely inefficient, right? Because you need to scan everything, create the copies of everything to create this association, and then, you know, actually run the thing and construct the final expression, right? The whole point of map and replace and all that is that they go through the expression once, modify the things as appropriate, and then let evaluation proceed.
Actually, I wonder if there's I'm not sure this is a good idea, but I mean, I wonder if there could be a way of like calling functions that use, you know, hash string, like named slot arguments, calling them in a way where you don't have to construct an association first. Like, I mean, right? You know, like, even if it's just some like internal kernel function that you know.
I would have thought there has to be, right? That you don't have to construct it. Yeah. Yeah,
because by the way, that would also be useful for you know, like with Rob's arrays, future of arrays, data container thing. That would also be useful for that, because we were talking about like, well, what if you map over it? Does it have to create an association for every row if you're mapping over some like column-based array kind of thing? And if it could not make an association for every row, that would be great.
I think that definitely sounds like a doable thing, and it definitely sounds worthwhile. And that would remove that efficiency objection. And in fact, you know, once this has any level of compilation capability, one could find out which things it needs to, I mean, you know, it should be able to find out, just like, I mean, it's similar to finding out in a module or something what the variables are. You know, lexical scanning of this thing doesn't seem impossible. And it seems to me perfectly reasonable that this is lexically, I mean, I don't know what happens if there's a sub-function in here. No, it's hopeless. It's absolutely hopeless. This is
no. If it evaluates, if it returns a I mean, slot is already lexically scoped to be inside a function.
Yeah, right. So it's lexical,
know.
so you can scan it. Right. So this is perfectly doable to scan for hash whatever things. I kind of like this idea. I mean, in that, and maybe it's a headdress, or maybe it's a, I mean, what other functions could have a meta version?
Well, okay, so to be clear though, this doesn't fix the original problem we were talking about, which is that there's also association map and key map and parallel map, etc. So is there going to be a meta version of every one of those?
No.
I mean, this is why originally we're talking about some sort of headdress or something.
Yes, but I'm going to have to go in a second because I have to give a talk in a few minutes here. I apologize. This is a really good topic. I mean, but I really like this meta idea, so to speak. But I agree, it does not solve the parallelism, which is, I think, a separate thing.
Right.
Or association or key, but yeah.
Yeah, although I'm still, it's not clear to me why, Christopher, you're arguing that it doesn't make sense as headdress. I mean, if, right, map or whatever function, it looks, is this headdress here? Based on the headdress, it provides, rather than providing #1, it provides, pound value, or maybe #1 through 4, whatever it is we decide, and just, rips it away and then gives those arguments to the to the function inside of it.
Well, maybe it depends on the name. I mean, I think if the name was something like, indexed function or whatever you had above, that I think could be confusing, because it just, you think that map is just going to blindly apply this thing. And especially if it has the name function in its name, it sounds like you're creating a new function, and that this function is somehow going to have some counter in it or something like that. And you might try and use it in a while loop and then be mystified that, hey, the index isn't going up. So I don't know, maybe if it has a better name.
Yeah. Well, I mean, basically this is, really what this is about, this is you're providing conceptually an association.
So, but this reminds me a little bit of, in some languages, like I think Python does this, and I'm not sure what else. They do things where when you run a for loop, Go does this. Go does this. If you run a for loop over, an array, you say, for x in array, blah, 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 and that's like mapping over array with x being the variable. But you can optionally say, x comma I in array, and then the I is going to be the index. So it's essentially like every map is map indexed, and if you don't ask for #2, it's not a problem. I don't know. It sort of reminds me of that, but you have named things.
Right. I have to go, unfortunately. But you guys could continue this. I'm sorry, I have to go. Yeah. See you soon. And does somebody else want to share, or should we wrap this meeting for now?
Why don't we wrap this and pick this up fresh? And
okay, fine. All right. Sounds good. Okay. Thanks to folks on the live stream also.